we go. So thank you very much to everyone for coming today to our second TRIPSCY Open Forum. And I got some really great feedback from the first event. I'm glad for the people that I heard from who were really appreciative of the time that we got to spend together. I want to share a little bit about our agenda for today. And then I'll tell you who to contact with different questions or concerns during the course of this event, and then we will get rolling. So our agenda for the day, our first presenter is going to be Heidi, Heidi's waving, and she is a physical therapist from the Middlebury region. She can introduce herself more thoroughly, but today she's going to be speaking about, and tell me if I don't get this quite right, but using common household seating and objects to provide improved support for students with hypotonia and joint laxity and similar concerns while learning from home. Is that a pretty accurate assessment? Okay, great. And then for our second session, I'm going to facilitate a conversation about different practice models that people are using right now to connect either directly with their students and clients or to connect with the teams of support people that are working with their students and clients. And I'm going to offer now that I'm not in a position where I'm engaging in direct service right now. I've gathered a lot of resources, and I'm going to be presenting about the things that I feel like I know well, some information about the coaching model, and then a bunch of resources that might be supportive to you. But if you have ideas and thoughts that have been of things that have been really working for you, or challenges that you're having with your service to your students and clients at this time, or connecting with their teams, I really hope that you will join in and join in that conversation. Just like last time, we'll be collecting any helpful resources that you have available. Tamara, which you can see her name is Tamara Yandow, she again is going to be our resource collector. So if you have something that's a website, please put it directly in the chat box and we'll make sure that it makes it into the resource list for the day. If you have a file, you can email it to Tamara. And Tamara, can you please put your email address into the chat box? Thank you so much. Phoebe is collecting notes on our behalf today, and we will also release a note sheet that has a summary of this event. Just like last time, there will be a recording available. There will also be certificates available. Again, just bottlenecked in the way that all of us are with our lives and our work at this particular juncture. So apologies for not getting them to you. I promise they're coming, and I promise I'm good for them. So one more piece of information. Everyone is really familiar with using mute and using video on and off. If you want to change your name to identify yourself by your region and your role, you can do that by going to your own picture, clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right corner of your own picture, and renaming yourself. And if you can do that, that just helps us to know a little bit about who is here, and helps when people speak up to know whose perspective we're getting or what kind of perspective we're getting. So thank you so much again for coming today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Heidi. And I just realized that I need to make Heidi a co-host so that she can share her own screen.
I just Does that work? Okay. All right, so my name is Heidi Wilhelm. I have a private practice in Middlebury. I see mostly early intervention, birth to 3. I do a little bit of school contracts for kids in our county, but I also see school-aged kids in the medical model. And I'm noticing kind of a lot of common themes with our kids. We have a lot of kids that have loose ligaments and hypotonia, and so I'm finding that they're needing to really work on their positioning, especially now that they're home a lot. I kind of have 3 mottos. I want them to change positions often and both sides, both ways. I use that all the time. And then move your fluids. Most of you are probably familiar with what ligament laxity is, with a decreased or increased range of motion in the joints compared to the general population. There are many research articles out there now that have shown that that's a predisposing factor to injuries, especially in sports. They're more likely to have chronic pain type of syndromes, overuse syndromes, poor postural control. And then with hypotonia, which is our low muscle tone, that's the decreased resistance to stretch of the muscle fibers. And that can cause postural instability and a whole lot of other things. Those can be from trauma, it can be from environmental factors. I tend to see a lot of children that have really low tone, which happens to be as a result of opiates that they were exposed to in utero, possibly. And then there's also the genetic factors that play into that. Now, with hypotonia and ligament laxity, lots of times kids can also have general hypermobility. And hypermobility, they now think is affecting up to 10 million Americans. So they think it's just as common as fibromyalgia. And so they're really starting to put a lot of research into how we can help people trying to prevent this chronic pain. So what I kind of put together were just some different ways to help position these kids while they're at home. So I'm going to use my kids for most of these pictures. Sitting, we've got square, sitting in the chair, feet supported, ideally on a stool or a box. Pelvis is on a firm surface. But again, I like kids to move a lot. Every 5 to 10 minutes, I usually recommend they're switching positions. So maybe they're going to be sitting on a disc. This kind of disc came from TJ Maxx. This was like $10 in the exercise clearance section. They do make the fancier wedges, that we can buy, and this is really helpful to kind of help support the kid's pelvis to tip it upright a little bit more for kids that tend to be pulled down by gravity that don't have that core stability. Gravity is constantly pulling down on these kids. So even if they have cerebral palsy or a scoliosis, we're really trying to make sure that they're staying upright. But at the same time, I want to make sure that they're doing both ways, both sides. So that's why I like to switch positions a ton. Sitting on a yoga ball is great, but sometimes they're going to be fatigued. So they're not going to be able to sit on a yoga ball for maybe a 40-minute Zoom class, so making sure that if they have the ball, that then they can switch after 5 or 10 minutes back to a regular chair. I like to use a yoga block in chairs sometimes because that kind of lifts up the pelvis, and then you can put the kids' hips into a different position. You can get into that butterfly sitting. You can get into a crisscross applesauce with the hips kind of open a little bit more that way. And that's, again, something you can just get at TJ Maxx. I like to practice lots of butterfly sitting. Let's see. Make sure. Okay, so this is my son. He was a little early. I'm hypermobile, so he's a little hypermobile, and this was kind of his preferred positioning. The hips are totally internally rotated, and he's just kind of hanging on his ligaments most of the time. So I don't want these kids to be hanging out in extreme positions for long periods of time. I think it's great for them to use their whole range of motion, but we just don't want them to sit at the end range for very long. So this is a position that I would kind of discourage. So I'm always trying to get him into a circle sit. You can see where I put a pillow underneath his bottom, and then he's up against the side of the couch. We've got another pillow supporting the other knee. If we ask a kid to sit in butterfly and they don't have the trunk support or they don't have the range of motion in their hips, it's actually going to make a lot of work for the hip adductors. And so the hip adductors are going to be trying to hold the knees up, and it's going to get really, really uncomfortable. So if you can kind of bring the pillows or the supports up to where the hips can actually rest comfortably and let the inside of the hip muscles relax, then you'll actually start to get some opening of the hips. This is another kid who was a chronic W sitter, and it's my friend's kid, and I went to her house and he's sitting and playing video games in a big wide W sit. And I'm like, he can't do that for very long. She's like, well, I don't know, he can't fix it. And so we just used pillows. You know, he's technically in a butterfly sit, so he's got each knee is supported with the outside of the pillows, and then I put a pillow underneath to help hold his upper extremities up a little bit so that he didn't have to be holding it against gravity the entire time he was doing his activity. This is again more sitting stuff. Here they were just pretending they were driving a car with different things we could find around the house. But I really find lifting up the pelvis on a pillow or something is really helpful to help get the pelvis in a proper alignment. Sitting on the floor when they're doing activities, a lot of kids will default to whichever side is easier. You know, by the time they're 3 or 4, they often have a hand dominance preference, but so that's going to kind of make them shift to the other side even more often. But this just kind of incorporates one-sidedness, and so they're not going to be weight shifting to the other side as well. My big piece about weight shifting both ways is because gravity is pulling down on us. I want equal inputs in the vestibular system. I want it to be pulling on their lungs equally. I want, you know, even the fluid in their joints to be pulling against gravity in all different directions. So I always talk to my families about, kind of pretend they're like a rotisserie chicken. Like I always want everybody to keep moving and rotating over. This always was his preferred position. He wanted that left leg tucked in and the right knee up. And if you look at a kid, you're like, oh, that's a great position. He's doing such a good job. Look at his play. But that was the only position he would play in when he was sitting. So whenever I could, I'm trying to encourage that other side. So maybe I'd have him do his free play on the floor for a little while, and then I'd scoot him over to the couch, throw some pillows against it so that he can practice this side sitting with his feet to his left. He needed support all the way up to his neck, basically, because his neck wasn't even strong enough to hold it up that way. And you'll find low tone kids when they go through growth spurts, when they're really sick, if they're super fatigued, they lose their whole muscle infrastructure. You know, they just kind of give in to gravity. So having extra supports is really important. We can't always just ask them, sit up straight. Like literally their muscles just cannot do it anymore. So they're gonna need more support. So here he's bigger. We're still working on feet to the left, but he doesn't need the neck support anymore. He pretty much only needs it up to kind of low ribs. And now he's even able to side sit feet to his left all by himself. Usually by the time they're 9 or 10, you kind of get more of that solidification in the cross brain. And so if you've been practicing movement patterns consistently from the time they were little, by the time they're 9 or 10, their bodies often are able to do it on their own or with less support. The other thing I wanted to say was like limiting a deep squat. I don't have pictures of that. But a lot of kids will go into a really deep squat when they're playing on the floor, and that's just another position that's considered hanging on their joints. They're not using any muscles when they're in that deep squat. Yes, they're using muscles to get in and out of it, but the time that they're hanging out in it is actually really bad for them. So I tell them to limit deep squatting. And then the W sitting. W sitting, especially as a child is still growing, puts a lot of torsion on their femurs and their tibia, and so they're more likely to have lateral tibial torsion. So I really, really encourage all of the kids that W sit, try to get them up and out of that and really support their hips and their trunk so that they can be in a different spot. Sometimes for trunk support, I like to just have I take these same cushions and I just stick them behind us. Or we take a sweatshirt and we roll up the sweatshirt and stuff it behind us. Sometimes I'll put them in the corner, or if the couch is up against a wall, you can have them back up so that they're in a wedge, and that kind of helps with some lateral trunk stability as well, especially if they're doing ADLs, trying to reach their socks, put shoes and socks on and off. Having them up against a corner can really help them be able to reach their feet with their legs more externally rotated. Let's see. I like to make sure they're playing in all different positions. On their belly, you can support their chest with a pillow or a towel roll. If they're really low tone and they can't hold their head up, I often like to have them over the edge of a couch or over the edge of the bed. Maybe the book is on a stool so that they can easily turn the book with their hands that are kind of hanging over the edge of the couch or the bed. And then integrating even supine into their activities, going underneath the table, inside a big box or something like that. And a lot of kids that have low tone, I find they often are tight in their back, or they have bony prominences. And so they often need extra support underneath their back for their hips and their shoulders. Otherwise they get some pressure points. So they may need some extra cushioning. So a yoga mat or just folding up a blanket or something will make them a lot more comfortable and more likely to do that. This is side lying. Again, he really liked being on his left side. His right side is up. He was doing great stuff with his hand, holding his head up really well. But then when I would ask him, like, okay, let's switch over to this side, this is what he would do. So you can kind of tell there's red flags with the kids that only want to play on one side. And again, if you're just looking at it, you're like, oh, they're doing a great job, but they're only preferring one side. So I think it's really important as the kids develop to just flip them over. And sometimes it's just switching it and you get on the other side, or tell mom or dad, okay, now move the camera to the other side of them. And oftentimes the kids will be more likely to switch, but they may need more support. So for him here, I would probably put like a pillow underneath his ribs. I might even put a pillow underneath his head and a pillow in between his knees so that he could be more comfortable. I kind of think of like, what did my body need when I was pregnant? I needed pillows like supporting everything. And so that's kind of what these kids need, especially when they're fatigued or trying to work on hard positions. Tall kneeling is great. One thing I do like to caution about is resting their tummy on the surface for too long. Obviously for a little bit of time, it's okay, because I'd rather have them upright and get used to weight bearing through their knees. But if I can, I pulled the chair back a little bit, and then she kind of, her gluteal muscles and her abs are going to be engaged a little bit differently. And then you can see she's not arching her back quite as much as she was here, and it's going to change the angle of her shoulder. One of the research articles was really looking at shoulder injuries with kids with ligament laxity, and a lot of it has to do with this angle, the glenohumeral angle in here. So decreasing the arch in their spine is going to help improve their shoulder positioning, which then will help them use both hands. Let's see. So standing on a floor, standing on a stool, having the stool there so that sometimes they can stand on the stool, sometimes they can be on the floor, is going to be really important. A lot of kids that are weak up here, they're going to be using accessory muscles to hold their arms up, and then they're going to get more impingement type syndromes. I'm surprised at how many kids I see that are 8 and 9 years old that have impingement and like cervical radiculopathy, and it's all because of instability and poor positioning. So if we can really teach our kids to have good positioning, it would really help. The other thing I don't have a picture of is half kneeling, where they've got one foot, they're on one knee and the other foot is up, in a half kneeling. And that's a position that a lot of kids will hang on their ligaments. They'll technically sit on their foot, and then they'll kind of prop their chest against their other knee that's holding them up. And so I think that's a good position to try with all kids. But again, most kids can't hold a half kneeling for very long, but kind of integrating it into their play and position changes is going to be really good for them. And then standing, I like for any standing stuff, I'm low tone, and if they have a Trendelenburg, if they have weakness in their hips, they're going to have a hip drop. They're going to be more likely to use one hip to step up than the other. But even just shifting over, so even if he was doing an activity, I would have him just stand here, have one foot up on the stool, one foot on the floor. After a few minutes, put both feet on the floor, and then switch and put the other foot up on the stool, just to really kind of keep those hips open and the abs working the way they're supposed to. So that's kind of, those are the main positions that I really try to go over with families and stuff that they can use around the house. The other thing is moving your fluids, big body movements before, especially if they're really tired, if they just woke up. I mean, literally, they don't have their blood flow moving. And if they're low tone, like all of our fluids, our blood, our lymph fluid, everything kind of settles. And then if we just plop them and sit them up, then everything's still going to be settling. So I think it's really good for our low tone and every kid to kind of move their fluids before they have to do any repetitive activities or sitting static. So different things. I kind of put a handout together, Chayah, that I sent to you, like jumping like a bunny, jumping jacks, frog jumps, hopping on one leg, running in place, head, shoulder, knees, and toes. I'm a little teapot. Dance parties, freeze dance, rolling multiple times in a row, creeping on hands and knees to pretend like you're an animal, pretending, lying on your back and pretending to ride a bike or run, lying on your tummy, pretending to swim, doing like wheelbarrow walks over a big bouncy ball, bear walk on hands and feet, forward and backwards, walking and creeping up and down stairs, yoga, and all your go noodle type activities. So I think, we just want to make sure that they're using both sides, they're rotating like a rotisserie chicken, and they keep moving their fluids. So I don't know what everyone else is doing for positioning, but this is my soapbox for that. And that's all I've got. So I don't know if we want to talk about it or if anyone else has other ideas.
Heidi, do you have that? Caitlin Hubbard says, "Thank you. This is great." I agree. Do you have that handout accessible? Do you want to show it? Would you like me to show it?
Yeah. Is that too big?
We can't see the bottom. We can just see what you can see on your screen, but
what
I think that I wonder if a good +1 for this moment would be if other people want to chime in. It sounds like some of the pieces of equipment that you mentioned a yoga block, you mentioned a yoga ball, you mentioned like one of those commercially available disco sets.
Yep.
A stool.
I like this is from a dollar store. This is like a gardener's kneeling pad. And I find for my kids, for half kneeling and tall kneeling, if they have something like, oh, here's your kneeling pad, they're more likely to do it, and it kind of gives them a little less patellofemoral pain. Especially, that's what I wanted to mention, especially if a kid wears orthotics, getting them up on something when they're kneeling, because their ankles can't totally plantar flex when they're on their knees. So lifting them up, I would even use 2 of these stacked on top of each other. That's another thing, is wearing shoes inside. A lot of these kids that are low tone and loose ligaments, they tend to overpronate, they have flat feet, or they're a little more genuvalgus. And so making sure that they have really good supportive shoes is helpful. And with parents, now that everyone's been home, they're like, well, we don't wear any clothes and we don't wear shoes. And so I try to encourage having like an inside clean pair of shoes that they can kind of wear when they're just running around and doing standing stuff for at least part of the day. Will help to develop that arch in that foot too, so that it's not just always collapsing. So this is just kind of what I typed up, because I've been trying to do a lot of education with the daycare providers as well about positioning, because we're getting a lot of W sitting. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I was doing some research, and it basically said, like, that's the one thing that's going to kill Caucasians is Caucasians that keep reproducing with Caucasians, our low muscle tone is getting worse and worse. And so that's going to be something that we're going to have to really deal with, especially with the opiate crisis, with a lot of kids that are exposed to opiates in utero. Oftentimes they're born, I don't know if you guys have, I see pretty young babies sometimes, and it's amazing. Like a 4-day-old one time, he was like literally so tight muscle tone, you could put him on the floor and he would just like basically wiggle across the floor. But then if you wait a little while, usually the muscle tone swings the other way, and then those kids become really low tone. So I think as far as us trying to make sure we help decrease scoliosis, decrease repetitive injury, and help decrease chronic pain, kind of everybody coming at everyone, all these kids, to help support good posture using both sides and changing their positions a lot is going to be helpful.
Thanks, Heidi. You're getting a ton of appreciative feedback about your handout and the information that you're offering. And Heather Blackburn asked, is this a handout that you send to parents?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I tried to kind of type out stuff so it's pretty easy. I didn't use supine and prone. I tried to put it in kind of more regular everyday language.
I really love this, and I think this is a question that we're sort of all coming up against kind of on a daily basis as we are doing, whether it's more of a direct service, direct to student, direct to client approach, or whether we're coaching and consulting to someone else, is how do we translate things that we've done directly or even in consultation using kind of the equipment that we've chosen into the natural, excuse me, I have a little frog in my throat today, into the natural environment. And I think this is such a great list of both positions and activities. I haven't even gotten to read all the way through it the second time yet, but I'm wondering if other people either have other suggestions about positions or activities that you would add to this. I'm wondering if people have other pieces of just household furniture and equipment that you've used, or challenges that you're having with getting this kind of postural work and postural support in the home.
I guess the other thing is like a stool. I use the chair seat as a table very often and have a kid sit on the stool, and the chair is the table. Or I'll have the stool in between two chairs. So there'll be a chair on this side and a table on this side, so that the kid sits in the middle and then has to twist here to get something and then put it over here to do something else with it. Just kind of trying to integrate that both sides, both ways into their daily routine. I call it a lifestyle.
Heidi, I was curious, have you used, the yoga eggs as opposed to the blocks?
Not really.
I don't think I have any close by. So they're more of an oval shape, so that there's a little, two sides are flat, and then the other two sides are rounded, so you can get a little rock in there and get a little more movement. I've used those a little bit with some kids.
Cool. Yep.
They just generate a little more play.
Yeah, and especially for those kids, if they're sitting too long and they're low tone, like they tend to get tired. And I think a lot of it is lack of oxygen. It's lack of blood flow. Like they're literally just settling against gravity. So having that kind of brings in your dynamic seating versus static seating. But you can, I think having the option, something that's easy to put in and out of the chair so that they can take it out a little bit. And that sounds like it might be something too that you could use as a back support sometimes. And sometimes you could sit on it. Sometimes you can put your feet on it underneath the chair. I'll have to look that up.
Cameron put the link in the chat.
Great.
I've found too that just giving parents resources about how to get their kids moving in between the seated sessions and kind of educating them about why it's important has been helpful too, because I think a lot of parents, you know, they're trying so hard to get their kids to like sit down and get all their work done and do everything that's on their list. And then it's easy to kind of forget, oh, well, maybe, you know, they're wiggling because they've been sitting in front of the laptop for 2 hours straight.
Right.
Like,
or their legs going numb. They just don't know how to explain it.
And I think giving them just, you know, like this list or any, you know, any resources like that, I think is helpful, and it's easily overlooked. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and we have a couple of related comments in the chat about Valerie's asking about positioning tips for the older child who has been on the computer for video calls and needs support. And then Hannah's also noting that they've been making homemade balance boards for older students using a roll towel and a cutting board, or a laundry basket, or Costco box seat with pillows and a sit spot. So,
Yep.
And even integrating some of those for older kids for standing or sitting while they're working, and just changing that up.
Well, it's funny. I don't know how many of you were on the training yesterday, but that was a 3.5-hour video conference. And for me, I can't do that long. So when my video is off, I have a balance board and I have a yoga ball. And so I'm bouncing to make sure my fluids keep moving, because otherwise I'm going to fall asleep, or I'm going to have a lot of neck and back pain. So that's definitely one thing, you know, when I treat adults and they come in for chronic pain, a lot of it is all about, you know, trunk postural stability and equalizing both sides, and then making sure they're not in one position for very long. So it's all the same stuff we want our kids to be doing. I think making sure the kids do a Peck stretch. I like the doorway stretch. Where they kind of stand in the doorway and put their forearm against the door jamb and lean forward to kind of open up the front of their shoulder. That's a really good way to do a pec stretch after they've been on the computer. I like to do the chin, the cervical retractions, extension, and rotation, especially if they've been forward on the computer a lot. Really, really trying to make sure they're up tall and they're doing their chin tucks. Look up and a wiggle. And usually we want to do those multiple times in a row. So those are going to be good for us. I think having a standing position, I like to have I have a shelf where if my kids are on the computer too long, I can have them stand, you know, like a standing desk, kind of an option. But again, they have to have, I say, at least 3 different options during like one meeting. They should have 3 different places they can still attend to their meeting, but have their body in 3 different positions.
One thing that occurs to me is that a lot of the seats that we as adults choose to bring into our offices tend to be really soft and cushy, and that actually for our long-term seated postural health, anything that's soft or cushy is totally counterindicated, because it's just going to allow for all of that flumping and that like posterior pelvic tilt and whatever. And so I think that's one thing that I would say, Valerie, from my experience, is even just placing something that's relatively stiffer and firmer under the seated surface, and also behind the learner to bring them somewhat forward is, and obviously I'm an OT, not a PT, but like those are the things that I observe that really help with a little more postural uprightness and having to use your postural muscles a little more, which also improves arousal state and things like that. So that's kind of how I would make that link. Another material I really like, and I never know what it's called, but it's that really dense, hard foam. It's sheets of like foundation insulating foam. And when people are renovating their exterior of their house, you can see they put these sheets on. And I use those. Sometimes I'll build the floor up under a kiddo by using sheets of that foam, duct tape onto each other with holes for the chair legs cut out, so that they can't just kick it out of the way. It's really stabilized in place. And I find that's a really inexpensive and relatively easy to come by material that's pretty customizable, because it comes in like 1, 1.5, and 2-inch thicknesses. So that's the kind of thing that a family can pick up, like one sheet of it for, I think it's under $15 for a big sheet.
What's the material, Chayah?
I wish that I knew exactly what it was called, and I will let everybody, somebody here probably knows a contractor.
Yeah, is it just foam board? They just call it the insulated foam
insulating
board.
foam board that people put it, I guess they also will put it in interstitial spaces in their walls sometimes, but people, when they're, people put it around the exterior of their foundation. I think it creates like a moisture barrier and also creates an insulative barrier. It's just like it's a really a rigid foam board that you have to cut it with like a box cutter. And I find it super duper useful for this application. I have some pictures somewhere, but I would not be able to pull them up super readily.
And like you said, cutting the holes for the legs of the chair is really key, because if a kid's a little wiggly and they can feel the footstool moving, or if they're just trying to balance on a 2x4, you know, they'll be rocking it and then it'll slide out and then it won't be as helpful. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, I love that. And Sandra also just added, there's a Google extension that times you when working and will alert you when you should take a short break and a long break. Yes. That's another really great sport. Amy Erickson added and added a link for it. Awesome. Heidi, do you have any additional questions or statements or anything, or anybody else have any questions for Heidi before we transition?
I just typed it into the chat box, but I didn't know if, Heidi, would you be able to share the PDF with all of us?
Yeah, that's why when I emailed it to you, I wasn't sure if you could like email it to everybody or what's the best way to do this.
Yeah, it will end up,
Stuff. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it'll end up either directly included in the bundle that I send out to the group afterwards, or with Heidi's permission, we could probably even put it directly into the file folder on the UVM TRIPSCY website.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I just want to get the word out there. You know, I mean, I feel really bad when we have all these kids that are already getting some chronic pain, you know, and then that's often the way I can relate to the parents about it, because a lot of the parents have chronic pain, and I'm like, you could do the same thing for your body. So everybody should be doing it.
Totally. All right. Well, thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you for contributing to our group in this way. We really appreciate it, and it's so great to. I hope that we'll continue generating some ideas about how we're creating postural support and movement for our students and clients. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for pulling down your screen share. Well, I'm going to transition into, like I said, more sort of an open conversational forum about the kinds of the modes of practice that people are using right now, what seems to be working well, and what challenges people are continuing to have. And I just need to pull up my own notes. There we go. And like I said at the beginning, I'm engaged in technical assistance, which is essentially coaching and consultation to providers. So I am not in the trenches of how things are going with connections directly with students at this time. I'm wondering if people can turn their video on. I'm wondering, by even just like a show of hands, how many people are currently doing remote direct service? Are there people who would usually be doing direct service who are not engaging in direct service via remote platforms? I just realized that there are actually, I have more than one page of participants here. Pat, some of your clients or students you've been able to continue with, and others you have not been able to continue with direct service. Yeah.
I would say most, I haven't been able to do direct service because the parents are overwhelmed with just the school stuff that they're not wanting anything else. So I've been doing things, you know, packets, or like one of my districts uses Seesaw. I don't know if anybody else does that.
Mm-hmm.
Really helpful. I really like it.
I think Burlington is starting to use Seesaw, but they had difficulty rolling it out.
Yeah, I really like it a lot. There's already a lot of resources on it, and you can edit, you can make your own resources like video or multi-platform stuff, and kids go in and access it on their own time. Parents can go in. There's something else that I just learned about that I'm wondering if other people know, boom cards. And boom cards on Seesaw. There's like all this stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, another thing I have to learn. But after looking at it and trying it and doing like trial and error, it's like, wow, some of the stuff is really cool. And I would want to continue it long after all of this is behind us. Is anybody else using boom cards? No.
I'm hearing a lot of it, hearing boom cards discussed a lot among providers in the southern part of the state.
Could you write that in the chat so I get the spelling right? Please.
Are those things that you customize, like you make the video, or you're choosing from a preset of videos?
Both are options.
And so that's like that's a direct service to your student, but it's provided asynchronously. Is that how you would define that service that you're providing?
I guess so.
I guess I'm sort of,
all of the different terms, and I've tried to get some clarity about what Medicaid, because I have the school Medicaid stuff that I'm still supposed to do, and I'm not sure. I've gotten mixed information, like, yes, Medicaid will cover asynchronous, and then somebody said, no, they're only covering synchronous. So I don't know what, if anybody can clarify that for me, I would.
Pat, we were just told that Medicaid won't cover anything over the Seesaw platform.
I'm sorry, what was that? They will cover?
We were informed that Medicaid will not cover anything done over the Seesaw platform. So I don't know, but maybe your district doesn't, our district doesn't bill for OT and PT services anyway.
Yeah, one of my districts does and the other one doesn't, but the other one is gonna start. They had stopped, but now they're gonna start again. So yeah, I was told that they only cover synchronous, but then one of the Medicaid people at one of the schools said they'll cover asynchronous and synchronous. And so I haven't done it yet. I'm waiting to get definites. I can't seem to find anybody that has, like, you know, back when I did, you know, home-based, there were clear guidelines from, you know, Sue Mason about, you know, Medicaid coverage. I can't seem to get anything on the school side.
Is there somebody at AOE that is in charge of educational Medicaid?
We've gotten a list through CCSU from AOE that has it clearly defined: Medicaid billable, non-billable. I can do a search through my email right now and see if I can find it. But the general concept from what I understood was if the student is not actively present in real time with you, then it's not billable. But if it's just telephone, no video, and the student is on the other line, that is now billable. So a lot of my families who don't have internet or are maxed out on screen time, I have been able to do a 10-15 minute phone check-in with mom and the 5-year-old or 6-year-old on speaker, and that is billable.
I think another important part is that it has to be outlined really specifically in the distance learning plan for any of the kind of exceptions to be billable, right? Like I think you have to have it really mapped out in order for it to be put in, which makes sense, but just throwing it in there.
Yeah, there's 3 specific components of the SOAP note or whatever daily contact note you use, and it has to outline the mode of communication. So if it was a Zoom or it was a telephone or Google Meets, whatever mode of communication, that has to be outlined, who was present, and then of course the time and your subjective rest of your SOAP note. And then there's one more, I can't remember the third Medicaid specific need in that note, but I'll see if
That would be great, Hannah. And if you want to email that either to me or to Tamara, we'll make sure that it's made available to the group. So that sounds like really useful information for everyone to have.
I'm seeing another comment in the chat about families wanting direct sessions to continue because they don't want one more thing to have to do themselves. And Barb is also saying that she has Paris carrying out some of her suggestions in remote sessions for the kids.
That's great, Barb. I'm glad to hear that's working out for you. I would love to hear, that was one of the questions I was going to ask. I know the last time that we had sort of an open conversation about what was emerging in service delivery models, people were talking about starting to train and work with paras. Barb, can you talk a little bit more about how you've structured that or how you're doing your consultation around that? And
so for those students, those are kids that I'm sending email suggestions to the family, but I know that the family's not able to carry them out themselves. So I'm also sending the same list to paraeducators who might be doing remote sessions with the child several days a week as part of a special ed service. And then they're incorporating my suggestions into that time. So it's a special ed service the para's doing, but they're including some of my ideas. And then I'm sending the same materials to the paraeducator that I'm sending to the family. So the para has whatever is going to be cut out to demonstrate with the child that they're working with. It's a lot of work.
it sounds like it is, yeah.
But it's for certain families who I know the parents aren't able or capable or for whatever reason to carry out my suggestions, it's a way to slide it in there.
Yeah, that's great. And then you're also providing some direct service as well?
Yep, so I've got probably 14 kids that I do direct and consult with on their usual school year, and about half of them, the parents wanted to continue with a half-hour direct service session, and currently I'm using Zoom for that. Same thing, I'm mailing the materials to the child. I have the same materials, and it's challenging. But it requires a lot of communication with the parents. I text them the day before, tell them what materials to have out with the child when I actually do the Zoom call. So that's how I'm doing it. It's not always great. It's not always successful. Kids with behavior problems, it's challenging behaviors. It's challenging to even get them to get off the countertop and come and be in front of the camera sometimes, but it works for some families.
I was wondering, I just watched a little webinar that I want to advocate for. Many of you have probably seen it. I guess it came out actually several weeks ago, It was AOTA's, let's see what the exact name of it is, but from on-site to online, addressing student needs through a telehealth service delivery model. And it's actually free for all AOTA members. And for those of you who are still looking to eke out some last minute contact hours, it's 1.5 hours for free. But they actually did address behavior challenges. And I don't know, I think that's a really interesting conversation, is how, for those of you, when you are doing any kind of direct service or any time that the child is on the camera, what's working with helping that child to be responsive, or are you using a lot of coaching and parent involvement, or is it really you trying to connect directly with the student?
I just saw a kid earlier today over the telemedicine, and she gets really, really overwhelmed if I suggest something that's a little difficult, and she'll just start crying, and she'll just sit down and start her temper tantrum. And we've gotten to the point where I can be like, come here, and she'll get really, really close, and we'll be like, what's going on? You know, and then now we'll do the turtle song. We're like, okay, let's forget everything we were doing, and we'll just go back to the turtle song, and we'll start everything over. So I think it's just kind of having that rapport too with the kid, if you can, to kind of like, okay, I hear that you're frustrated. Please come closer and talk to just me. For a couple of my kids, that seems to work really well, but not all of them.
I think for some students, it's kind of one extreme or the other, but I think some students, it's been kind of an interesting time and opportunity to work with the parents on utilizing, you know, like the visual supports and the checklists and the first then boards, all of that kind of stuff that typically, I mean, I don't know, maybe you guys do, but honestly, usually we don't really work with the parents too much on that kind of stuff at home. So I think it's been neat to do that with some parents during sessions. But then on the other hand, the kids that need those supports and don't really have the parents who want to be a part of it, I think that's been like one of the most challenging parts, because it's kind of like, what can you do?
That's been setting up that structured environment. So either the balance board for the older guys, or the just the Costco box with pillows and a blanket on the side, and then they bring something like a washcloth or a towel, and this is my sit spot. And then everything that is motor oriented, like I'll have do a scavenger hunt and do your animal walks to the kitchen, and then your animal walks back to your spot. And then, like you were saying, Heidi, just really like trying the best to climb through that camera. Like, I'm right here. Yeah. But all those ways to support the visuals really have made a difference for both clarity and expectation and anxiety, knowing I do a visual schedule on the whiteboard or a visual schedule on a piece of paper, and they know there's these things, and then we're saying goodbye. This is not forever, I promise.
I like that, Hannah, how you're taking the same structures that you would have used in an in-person session and showing them that there's some familiarity and some commonality with experiences that they've had before. And also, Caitlin, what you were saying, I think that it is a really good opportunity for to bring some of those supports that we know are so helpful and effective. Yeah, generally we're not often bringing them into the home, right? I mean, if you're in school-based practice, it's probably not something that you're talking about very often at all. Are you creating those and giving them to families, or?
Some families, yeah, some families we've kind of, well, some of them have taken materials home from school, and others we've kind of just made, like a nitty gritty visual schedule and mailed it to them so they can have it. It kind of depends on the student. And then like one of my students, I just, like what Hannah said, I just have it and I'm showing them. which works okay if, you know, if the parents aren't so on board. But I think the most successful thing has been mailing an actual, you know, the actual materials to them to have there when that's possible. But yeah.
I want to point out, we were talking about professional development, and Pam has shared a posting that she put on RIPSY earlier about the telehealth summit for therapists, which I think is 4 days, if I remember correctly. Chayah, when you mentioned credits, this one's 4 days worth of free credits, so it's a lot.
Yeah.
I would say that it is, the times are really interesting, so check it out because it is international. So there's, the times are a little odd, but I saw a lot of really interesting things that the times worked out for me. And it is free, and that gives you sort of a specific amount of access, like 9 different things or something. And then there's a $30 premium access. And I think that to get actual hours, a certificate proving your hours, that you need to pay the premium. So check the fine print if that's your intent. But if you just want some information, it's free.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, that's great. Another professional development resource that kind of links our conversation from last week is something I found on AOTA. I just found it today, and it's the title is Now and Later, Addressing the Immediate and Future OT Needs of Adolescents and Young Adults. And it's discussing barriers that adolescents and young adults face during and post-COVID-19. And then it addresses a number of interventions. And I have not watched it yet. I just found out about it this morning. But I will add it to the resources, and I'm also going to copy and paste it into the chat here. One thing that I'm wondering, I mean, are there people who feel like your model of practice between now and the end of the year is still in flux? Or do people generally feel like you kind of are where you're going to be in terms of the kind of service that you're offering and the manner in which you're offering it at this point? I don't know if people want to like speak to that out loud or share in the chat box, and whether, depending on what, you know, regardless of what model of practice you're trying to use right now, whether there are particular strategies that you felt have been effective, or you think you would like some support developing. It's a super open question.
I have a question. We have a lot of school-based therapists here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think creatively about ESY. And one of the ideas that I've been mulling around in my head, and if anybody else is interested in doing, I would love to collaborate, is to create like a week-long summer camp, a virtual summer camp. A lot of the American Camping Association, the ACA groups, are supporting camps in doing totally virtual summer camps, and they're doing camp in a box. And so I've been trying to think about ESY, if I could get a week of support and students who are interested in doing summer camp, and being able to deliver a box that has all the dry ingredients together for Play-Doh, and all you have to do is add the warm water, and then we have an idea about how to make a Play-Doh or a Sculpey or some clay, right? I don't want to go into too much detail, but think about summer camp and then think about how to say, like, okay, Monday is this day, and it's wacky hair day, and it's also clay day. Tuesday is another theme, Wednesday, and then the togetherness is about every morning, maybe we get on and we do flag time together, or we do a morning greeting with some songs and some movement. And then every lunch we get on together and we just eat lunch together. It's not structured, but everybody's sharing a meal. And then every evening is a different camp in a box activity. Maybe it's s'mores and campfire, maybe it's stargazing and looking specifically at constellations, maybe it's music. So I'm a little bit bored with the Zoom treatments, and I'm trying to get my brain to be a little bit happier about continuing this through ESY and the rest of the school year. And that's been one of the ideas that's been mulling. So I'll put my email up in the chat, and if anybody wants to play summer camp or figure out summer camp, I'm excited to put it out there.
I agree with Pam that is a great idea, and it's like it's like wide eyes and joy. And Hannah, it sounds like we have a topic for our next open forum, because we definitely need to talk about ESY.
I have a question for people, because it's kind of related to your idea, Hannah, but I'm curious if people are doing one-on-one with just individual students, or if you have any situations. Like, I've done groups, and some of the kids have said, oh, could we all get on together? And I've been to do it because of, I don't know, just other parents with the other kids, and I don't know, I haven't been able to wrap my head around the privacy issues. And I did ask some of the special educators, and they said that their parents all had to sign off on stuff, but, you know, like confidentiality things, statements or whatever. But I've also had some teachers tell me that they have parents that are hounding them now because they're having these classrooms online, and parents are either not liking what some of the teachers are doing, you know, the teacher's doing, or the parent is upset because another child is doing something and they feel like it's interfering with their child's education, and they want something done about it. And so I'm just curious if anybody has any experience on any of those issues. I'd love to hear. And then, you know, if you're talking about a summer camp and a group meeting, whether, you know, that's kind of a similar thing.
I've only been doing one-on-one, and for my families who are not in the room directly with the student, I had them sign just an email, a permission for an independent one-on-one Zoom OT session with their child, and that deterred a lot of parents from, and then I do record, and that was in that release. If I am doing a solo one-on-one without a parent in the room, I have permission to record the session. So I have a lot of parents who stay just in the background, which is great. I'm more comfortable with that. I didn't go through all of the regulations for running my groups because it did take a permission from every parent to both be in a group, and I don't know how much they had to waive their FERPA rights, but there was some part of that too. That was, it was permission for other families to know your student is in a special education related service. So I've solely been doing one-on-one. And I don't know how it would work for summer camp, but that's one of those to put on the problem solving.
I work in 2 different school districts directly, and they are almost opposite. One, if OT services are delivered to the family, it needs to be, as special ed services, it needs to be recorded. In the other one, they specifically want no recording. In one, only one-to-one services are being provided, and that's it. It's not even something to discuss. And then in another one, Hannah, as you said, there's a lot of hoops to jump through if it is indeed a group session.
Phoebe, did you have the parents sign off on, like, do you have a way to know whether the parent's in the room versus not? Did you have some kind of a disclaimer form sign?
The school did. The school had that done for any services that were provided. For each type of service that was provided.
I'm providing mostly medical service telemedicine-ly, and I require that they have a parent in the room with them, you know, just as if I would if I was doing a regular in-person visit with them too.
There's a little active conversation going on right now around thinking about the summer camp around ESY eligibility. And Barb posed the question, are people finding that districts are easing up on their criteria for ESY? And just wondering what people are happening because of progress this spring. What could have happened, I'd throw the question of compensatory services in that conversation as well.
We had a meeting this morning with our special education director, and she shared that ESY services would only happen for students if it's documented that they showed regression from the Christmas or the holiday vacation, December break, and February break. And if there wasn't documentation of regression, that it wouldn't happen based on anything during this COVID time. And that compensatory services wouldn't be discussed until after regular school returns to session. Heather, do you want to clarify anything?
Yeah, they, here I can turn my video on so people can see me. One other area for qualifying for ESY was that if there was a significant delay that was well known and established beforehand, that and she also said if kids were in a growth spurt, or like there was an emerging skill that had been happening, and like Sandra said, no regression can be shown prior to when schools closed in March, post when schools closed in March, and that compensatory services, and this all came from AOE, compensatory services wouldn't even be on the table over the summer at all. That process won't even start until schools resume in session.
In a regular way.
In a regular way.
What do you mean by compensatory?
So if the services that were outlined in the DLP were not provided in the way that they said that they would be provided, then compensatory services could be looked at. When we asked the question of, well, what happens when we outlined the DLP, everybody did the best they could, services were provided, but this child still didn't make any progress because this isn't the best way for them to learn. Like, it clearly wasn't fate for them. Then what do we do? And she's like, we haven't got guidance from the AOE on that at this point. She also talked a lot about ESY. There's so many unknowns with ESY that the only guidance that they have right now is just that bit about qualifying for it. But what it's actually going to look like, whether it's in person with small classrooms, what transportation looks like, all that logistic stuff, or if it's still going to be remote learning, hasn't been decided by the AOE, and that little bits of information as it comes she'll share with us. So she sort of shared the hot off the presses and answered our questions about that from the memo that came out on Friday afternoon from the AOE about ESY and compensatory services.
So it sounds like eligibility for ESY hasn't changed.
It has not changed at all. And she said that the AOE made it really clear that services in the summer, so whatever this ESY looks like in the summer, should not be different than what your district has done in the past. So if we're not meant to provide more services sort of to make up for or to cover some of the progress that didn't get made over COVID, because general ed overall has regressed. And so that isn't even on the table at all. So that was the other thing that I thought was kind of news to me. I just figured that things would change a little bit for ESY to be a little bit maybe beefier during this time. And as she said, the directive is really clear that that is absolutely not supposed to happen. None of those decisions are supposed to be made until school resumes in a fairly typical way.
And that's all coming from AOE.
That's all coming from AOE. Yeah.
That's-
Did you get them? Did you see the memo from Friday? That came. So I can. I'm on my phone right now, but I'll buzz over to my computer and see if I can pull up that email, and I can share that with you, or maybe forward it again to you, Tamara, that we can share.
I think we should. Yes, I think that'd be great, Heather. And I think we could put in the link to sign up for the weekly update from the. If people want the weekly update from AOE on what it is, it'll get emailed right to you in your mailbox on a weekly basis with what's going on right now. We can put that in the resources also. I can't, I don't have enough technology right now to pull it up and share it. That's exactly what I had heard from the AOE update as well. The one difference I had heard, and it may be local interpretation, was that if teams had not already met to determine that eligibility based on that criteria, then those kids were, that was too bad. Teams had already needed to use that criteria and decided that the student was eligible. I'm fairly certain that's local though.
What our district had talked about was for eligibility, it's going to be normal eligibility. And then the ESY services, since we don't know if it can be in person, so they're anticipating it being online, and our district said it's just going to be a continuation of the DLP. So it's going to be the DLP, but as ESY services, not a different service. It's going to be just the DLP as an ESY. And that conversation was like 2 weeks ago. That's what our district had told us we were going to do.
Did they talk about duration for the DLP? Because literally our special ed director said that it would not be a continuation of the DLP when we talked to her this morning.
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking now because that was before the AOE had sent out that memo. So I don't know if they're going to change what they said, but they said that they didn't know anything about time frame because they're waiting on the directives for that. So they kind of just gave that one comment and then were saying, we don't know anything else for the rest of it. Was basically how it went.
I can't remember where I read this, but I read somewhere that that there's some kind of an organization that is planning litigation against the Vermont Department of Ed. They want their students, children who are on IEPs, to be able to get summer services regardless of that whole criteria of regression in the past, because they haven't, as a whole, have not been able to benefit from the education, and that it was that being at home was not a least restrictive environment for them. So that's interesting. I can't remember where I read it though, but it was in Vermont, and I just thought, oh, that's really kind of interesting to hear that. And having a child who has myself have a child on an IEP with learning issues, it's been really worrisome to me because he hasn't been able to access his education the way he would if he was at school. And he definitely is not on par with a lot of his peers who are able to. And so the gap is even larger. So as a parent of a child with special needs, IEP services, I could see where there needs to be something because going into the fall, he's going to be even more behind. And I would hope that it's not, that kids are going to be back in school in the fall. I'm hearing talk that might not be. So anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat. And I think there is such an extraordinary amount of unknown, and then we get information, and so often the information conflicts with what we've heard previously, or we're hearing conflicting information from different places simultaneously, or it conflicts with like our own best judgment, which is always really challenging. I'm aware of the time, and this has been a really really fruitful conversation, and I think it could continue for a whole lot longer. Out of this conversation, there have been a couple of things that I've heard. Well, there's one thing that I've heard come up, and one thing that I'm wondering if people would be interested in talking about in the future. One is to have a conversation about ESY. I don't know how much more we'll know in 2 weeks, but we will be that much closer to the end of the school year itself. So talking about ESY, both in terms of the structure, the content, and who is going to be receiving those services and how we're going to be providing them. And then the other thing that we haven't talked about since really early on is that people must be thinking about evaluations and assessments. I did collect some resources about, at least in the OT realm, different assessment tools that can be used remotely, and some different platforms that were waiving some access fees to their online scoring programs and things like that. But I'm wondering if that's a topic that people feel like would be interesting and valuable to talk about next time. Amy said assessments would be an excellent topic. I would love that. Yeah, me too. I think, are there other people that are interested in talking about assessment, or are there people who have been doing assessments?
I'm interested also in like the transition, the kiddos that are getting off of early intervention and turning 3, how that's gonna look right now, because right now everything's kind of on hold.
Yes, and there, yes, I would definitely say CIS is another agency that we're not necessarily getting very much guidance from at all. Awesome. Is there anyone who has done an evaluation in the past 8 weeks in this group?
I have not, but I know that in that training, that that Pediatric Summit, that one of the topics in there is online is a distance evaluation. So
awesome.
We may want to have a look at that information to help before maybe our group has a conversation, because I think it's going to talk about evaluation tools and things like that as well.
Thank you. The telehealth, the OT school-based telehealth webinar that I mentioned also does touch on evaluations, and it does give a list. I'm also just going to add, I found a really great website. It's called telehealthshare.com, and it's by 2 pediatric OTs, and they have a number of, I'm just going to put it in the box. They have a number of infographics, and one of them actually is several assessment tools that can be used remotely. And there are even more than I think they put. Oh wait, here's the actual link to the assessment tool. I looked for something similar for OT or for PTs and SLPs, and I couldn't find it, but I'm sure they're out there. Oops, I just sent that privately to someone instead of.
I'm curious, you asked the question if anyone had completed an evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
In our district, we're not allowed to do evaluation right now. All evaluations have been deferred. And so I'm wondering if that's the same situation for others, if evaluations are just being flat out deferred, or are people allowed to do evaluations within their practice setting, whether it be early intervention or schools, whether they're even allowed to do that.
So I'm allowed to do early intervention evaluations, but as because it's medical model, essentially, I do them in person. And it's very selective families for those.
All of our evaluations heard.
In one of my schools, they didn't say anything about not doing evaluations. For the most part, I found like it's not the best to do, but there was one situation where I did the PediCat online with the parent. It was just last week. And that was approved. That was through, I did Zoom, and it's an on-screen, you know, the parent and the school representative were able to see it. And then I also did a print tool where I was able to see the student as they wrote the letters on the print tool. And I verbally gave the directions. But that's the extent of what I've done. And I've deferred a lot of, I've been asked to do some assessment, or like I've been in a couple situations where they've said, does this student need OT? They're updating their IEP or 504 plan and really wanting to know what I would recommend for next year. And I've said, in a couple of those cases, I've said I really, like, they kind of wanted me to discontinue. One of them's a student who really needed the service, but the parent keeps pushing for it. And I told them that I felt uncomfortable making that kind of decision right now because I can't really assess effectively, and it would just open the school to further legal issues, and asked to defer it to the fall. So it's kind of mixed.
Well, it sounds like we have a great topic for our next event, and I'm glad to see it. I see that let's see, Hannah said that Scoodles, which is it's a handwriting assessment, is creating an online assessment. I also found out that the SFA, which is the school function assessment, the DASH, the VMI, the sensory processing measure, and the sensory profile can all be used remotely. Apparently the DAISY can be used as a clinical observational tool remotely in collaboration with a parent. So, and I believe the DAISY is one of the eligibility tools for preschool, if I'm recalling. Doesn't change the issue with communication from CIS, but I think that's good to know. And then also I learned that Pearson and WPS are both offering some free access to their scoring and administration on their test tools and manuals. So definitely let me know if you're interested in being part of, if you're interested in helping to collect resources for that conversation. Yeah, unless anyone has any parting words, I want to thank everyone for coming and being part of this event today. Again, if you would like a certificate of attendance, please put your name and email address directly into the chat box. Again, I do apologize that things are just on a different timeline these days, but they are coming your way. And all of the resources, the notes from the event, and as soon as we can bring them together, also the recording from today will be available online ASAP. So thank you everyone for your time and your participation and your work. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
I'm just going through and taking these links real quick before they disappear.
We'll be sending them
Amy,
all
do
to
you know you can
too.
save the chat?
Oh, well, that would be easier. How do I do that?
If you open the chat box,
Yeah.
you see there's 3 dots. 3 dots usually means do something else down at the bottom
Got
right
it.
corner. Yeah.
I'm there. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Bye,
Thanks,
Amy.
Amy, and thanks for
Bye,
your
everyone.
time.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording.